Let's talk about one of the finalists then. So obviously the reason why, spoiler if you wonder, like they haven't talked about Weibo very much. It's because the joke is like that's going to be one of the most fraudulent fucking finals in the history of League of Legends. Like remember in the Swiss system, they lost to everyone Asian they played. They lost to fucking KT Rolster. Dude, they even lost that ridiculous game to G2, which everyone was praising G2. I remember watching that and going like, this got to be one of the worst throws of all time. What the fuck? Like did the ADC like just forget how to team fight or something? What the fuck? They never pressed R. Like it was mental. Like in the Swiss system, they looked whack. They got NRG, which I'm sorry, look, we can have the NRG conversation if we talk only about the West. There's not even a convo if we add in these Asian teams. So like NRG was free as fuck. And then the joke is cause BLG beat Genji for them. Basically, the one team they beat that's Asian, and people don't know at this tournament was BLG. That's it, and it was a 3-2 series. And as we're talking about, it was sort of a way. It wasn't like League of Legends for the rest of the year. That really was fucking like the Shy versus Bin or something. Like it's ridiculous. Like that wasn't normal. That was the normal series. So like, I don't even think when I look at this tournament, it sounds mad because he came second at the World Championship. I don't even think Weibo was that good. Zabatine, what do you think?
No, I mean, from the play, the thing is there is the result and the play, and sometimes you don't have to play that good to get into the final. That's the way the tournament is designed. Like if you don't have a loser bracket and you have just a random draw, you accept, right? Some people are pro. I'm not here to discuss the format, but it's a byproduct of a format 100%. I don't think there is anything special. I think Xiao has been playing pretty mid, like his game against Nisqy. I mean, as a European, I'm always have more vivid memories of like European performances. The game of Nisqy, I think, is being runner-up on. I think Nisqy plays very well, especially this year. I think he has played much better than his previous years. So it's not a shame to lose to Nisqy, but getting run over. Right, it's like he didn't lose. He got run over the way I would play in solo queue and go back and get killed again and again and again by a Sylas, right? Because I can't accept the state of the game and I just want to keep trading to see if I can come back somehow. That's really how it felt. So I don't think that Xiaohu, which is a player I really used to praise, and I think he's a very, very good player, has played particularly better than his average. I think he was playing better the last 2 years.
He was proven a point.
I don't think anyone really stand out in this team. They've made pretty big macro mistakes. They've had pretty hesitant late games. Their flank patterns, which is the classic LPL flank patterns, were very well studied and read by the Korean teams, especially T1. Like they were really never in danger. So overall, I'm pretty sad that this draft happened because this is Genji too. This is just Genji's fault of losing against BLG. But having a semi of BLG versus Weibo, and not even having the climax of having like Bin versus Deus at the end was fairly disappointing. I wish I had relevant things to say about Weibo, but I would say they weren't probably even in the top 3 better performances at these Worlds. I don't think so.
Yes. No, I agree with you as well. This is why the other thing is, even though this isn't going to be a big format discussion, look, for people like me that want a lower bracket, I couldn't ask for a better fucking example, could I? Like we just said earlier, there was like one good match, which even then didn't quite go supernova to game 5. And then the rest of the games were like, what the fuck? And the bracket basically ruined the tournament. Like, I'm sorry, that's just it. By the way, here's another thing if you're a T1 fan. In theory, you should agree with me. By the way, if you had a low bracket and you could have played like a Gen G or something like that in the final, or even JDG again, that would be a way cooler way to win the tournament. Like, it'd be even more epic if you won then. Yeah.
The sleeper OP of these Worlds is actually NNG. I'm so sad because I think it's so underspoken that these.
Like you think if they played anyone except T1 basically, they might have gone further.
Because they arrived very well prepared. They had a very, very good series against JDG. They were looking very promising, and I was very scared for T1, and then T1 came with this crazy meta shift. So you had no prep. It's literally they came day one and they're playing against like a team that's perfectly prepared. And I think the performance of T1 in the quarter is the best single series from a team I've seen, like in terms of playing League of Legends ever. Like the game 2 is the best game I've ever seen in my life. In terms of single performance, like one-sided, not like, it was a close game. It's like just like how you stomp your opponent. And LNG looked garbage in this series. But they look garbage because T1 has had so much control. And I think that if they were anywhere on the other side of the bracket, we would have had actually a great final. with LNG. I think they could have beaten BLG. I think they were good enough to beat Genji. They would have been in final, and with more information and more prep, I think this team would have been very dangerous. So I was extremely annoyed that we ended up with. I don't mind having the final in the semis happen every year. Last year it was the T1 against JDG again, and it will happen with the draw format. But the fact that there is no loser bracket, and on top of that you have like these teams that are super good that are dying in quarters, makes me very sad. Because once again, I think that the best 3 teams at Worlds were T1, JDG, and LNG, and they were way closer in level than what people think. And all the other ones are the teams that everybody's going to speak about, because since they died in quarters, probably, LNG wasn't a good team. And that's what people will remember, but I don't think it's the case.
Fair enough. I think one of the just to talk about them, I think one of the biggest problems with the way that Worlds went, and I'm not saying that like Worlds has to go the same way every time. LNG had a massive problem where like Zika had this massive high for like LPL summer playoffs, and everyone basically assumed that Zika was just going to continuously play the same way the entire time, right? Now, if you go look at the rest of Zika's like pro career, that would tell you that most likely is not going to happen. Second of all, like picks that like Zika was using and the meta that Zika was playing in was like going to change. But third was LNG were like really, really good and one of the best teams actually at like abusing side lane like pockets, particularly like LeBlanc. Scout was so good at abusing LeBlanc and like side and creating like pressure zones. But that once that got taken off of them, because LeBlanc had been like basically removed by the time Worlds came round, that was like one of their like unbeatable drafts. If Scout was on LeBlanc, you could not win it. They had automatically lost that, and then they were carrying probably the worst individual player from like the good teams and Hang. And I don't like.
You don't think you're good? You don't think they were good?
No, I think LNG were like a good team, and they had like the winning parts of LNG. Basically, the reason that the LNG didn't do well was because the winning parts like didn't execute. There's a version of LNG where like Tarzan and Scout come in a better individual form and they make that series look a lot closer. But at any given time, you can lose series really, really badly, particularly if it ends up being a bot lane meta when you have a support player as bad as Hang. Like Hang is genuinely like dreadful. And like Gala like free coasts with him and he puts up a lot of his like shit. But if you hand like the bot lanes, like if you give Paze and Delight just like free coast to just like scale, like that's idea for them. Like even Light and like Crisp, you've seen Crisp like champion pool at this Worlds, like he went deep. Even against like people like Korea, he was going everywhere. Hang's just not that player. And if like Scout and Tarzan aren't getting to do their thing around like mid lane or like get to a point where they're playing in sides, like that's where I was always not so much down on them in terms of like the individual players. It was just I had never seen what LNG were going to do as a team because I'd never seen them solve those problems, if you know what I mean. So
yeah, makes sense.
That's why I wasn't really as high on them, because JDG had problems for me as like a team, right? But the way JDG always solved those problems is like I've seen JDG win impossible games from like 9,000 gold down. So I was like, you know what I mean? I've just got to tip my hat to you and just be like, well, that happens. But I didn't see LNG do that. Like that was never who LNG were as a team. To talk about Weibo, it was actually crazy that you were talking about Light there. Light is one of the infamous perennial chokers of the LPL in terms of like just loses the plots on time. But once playoffs came round, Light was.
He was good, yeah.
And
he was one of the main reasons they made the final, yeah.
Yeah, he ended up with the damage, one of the top 5 damage records at Worlds on the Aphelios series. I think Weiwei like had like an amazing Worlds, and
he's a sleeper, isn't he?
Weiwei and the Shy basically solo won them the game against BLG. I think Jun massively misplayed like that series and did not evaluate like how to win the series, and I was really surprised to see Weiwei basically like outperform him, because going into that series, it looked to me like Weiwei and the Shy had a coordinated like understanding of how they were going to like freeze out and beat a player as dominant as Ben, and you know what I mean? They executed it on average more than they didn't, and I was really, really like impressed with their execution in terms of their top side, because the Weiwei and the Shy, they were like a massive problem in terms of their disconnect. And then at Worlds, it was like 3 winning games against BLG topside into Bin. And yeah, June didn't help this situation, but Bin's been doing that all year, and you've done what many teams have not been able to do, which was basically create freeze-out games against Bin. And so I think this was actually just like, this World was like a really funny example of like all the good parts of Weibo. You know, Crisp is still like a talented, got a lot of depth on Engage and Enchanters, still one of LPL's like, he's no longer like elite in the sense of like his understanding of like map setups is quite archaic, but effective for like what, you know, I mean, at least it is like, there is like a coherent like system there, even though it can sometimes be like what people would like say obvious or something. And you know, you've seen like the Shy like playing out wins and being lane dominant. You've seen Light like playing out Aphelios games and being like a really good team fit at ADC. I think the only player that really didn't show up to Worlds, which is sad, because he was like one of my favourite players was like Xiaohu. I don't think Xiaohu played any games really all that well, but he had like a good Jace game actually. I remember, but Xiaohu really looked like the paper tiger of this Worlds, and it was a bit of a shame because I think if Xiaohu was in a better place individually in mid lane, I think there's like they could have made the finals more interesting. I thought they would be able to just snipe one game. I thought it was going to be like Scorched Earth, like T1 were going to blow them at the park. But I thought there was going to be one game that was going to be closer, because like basically they would just coin flip the entire game and just like see like what we could do with variants. And we never really got that. And it didn't look like Weibo Gamer were even willing to even go for like that type of style. They did actually just try and play like a heads up game and never really got anywhere. And it just wasn't a very good period for Xiaohu. So even though he got to have a Worlds final, you know, the Xiaohu summer going to sleep meme kind of continues. So,
by the way, I'll give you something sick as well. I'll tie together two of the things you were talking about there. The other thing that's so gross is this is like what you were talking about earlier, Zabatine, about how like the narratives, sometimes if they're really like juicy, they almost like blind you to what actually happens in the game. What's so sad is there were two narratives that could have played out, like he was talking about there, that are so brutal. Like if people don't know, what's hilarious is Xiaohu and fucking Scout have like the opposite profile, which is like Xiaohu wins Spring and then MSI, and then Scout wins like Summer and then he's won Worlds, right? And both of them obviously are players which, because they're Chinese, obviously play in the Chinese region, they never get their credit. Like everyone knows, because MSI until this year wasn't like that sick a tournament, no one really does give Xiaohu the credit for winning 3 of them and winning one as a top player. They just sort of think like, whatever, and they sort of delete that one from their minds and go, but he never did anything at Worlds. And it's like, one, he was fucking awesome in all of those ones. Like the top lane one was genius. I think that's like the most underrated win of all time. That was mega. And then also the same thing with Scout. Like, dude, I got triple wrecked on that quarters because one, I did a video right before. It was even called Zabatine, like the underrated Scout. Give me a break. And the reason I made it is because beyond the narrative, which was amazing, by the way, you couldn't script an anime narrative like this. He literally was Faker's understudy, left to the LPL because they probably thought, we don't need this guy. And then he comes back, wins Worlds, and now he's going to, in theory, you think, beat Faker in like year 10, eliminate him from Worlds for the first time ever in round of 8. Like, dude, that's like your dream if you're Scout. It's like the whole vision boards coming into play. And then also, when all the fans do the work, like it's bad enough, dude, they do it with Knight and Chovy. None of these people watch the LPL. And the reason I know is because they think Scout is trash. Right, bro, the reason he won both MVPs, even though I actually think the better mid laner is Knight, is because MVP has to come from performance. And if you look at what he was working with and how he individually played, like Kira said, if you watch him play like a LeBlanc game, this guy was smurfing on the LPL both splits. Like, no joke, like most of the regular season games, it was just the Scout show. He would just go crazy and just carry the game. And so I can't even believe, like, if you only saw that quarterfinals, you don't even know Scout, which is the saddest thing. Like, sadly, that is not the player I was watching all year.
Yeah, like the thing is there's a version of Scout that was, I think, the later half of the spring LPL season was the best player in the world. By the time before playoffs happened, I felt like Scout at the end of spring reg was the best player in the world. Then playoffs happened, but he had like an amazing year. like just independent of that. And it's always really sad when specific LPL All-Star players like don't show up to Worlds, like the MVP version of Doinby. Flandre never got to go to Worlds as a star player. You know, I mean, I could sit here and list them all. And so now Scout is another victim of a narrative that is quite serious of like when the LPL sends like a very, very good team, there seems to be like a general collapse. This general collapse wasn't, you know what I mean, they didn't get out of groups, which is usually what happens. With the improvement of like the stability of groups, it was kind of hard. But like Scout, we never got to basically see like the MVP LPL like Scout Tarzan combo execute at all, really, which is a real shame, because I think going into Worlds, that was like one of the things that I was really excited for, even though I'm not sure how many like games or series it was going to win. It was the fact that we just didn't get to see it at all. You know what I mean? Like you were talking about how dominant like the individual series was. Zabatine, the finals and the quarterfinals were, you know, it was like they were playing. And that's where it kind of gets sad. Is like you never got to see those like teams like even come into the series. It just looked destined from like game one that like T1 was going to just dominate them in a very specific way.
I mean, I think about Scout. I'm not as sad because I'm pretty sure that this guy is gonna have banger performances in the future. I think if you just watch him play and you look at his age and his profile, he will be good in any team. He's the type of player that's versatile enough. He has a pretty deep champion pool. Plays most of the champion that will come back on the front of the meta. So I think his case, I think TT has been playing worse this year. Was it TT? I'm sorry, I always misunderstood the jungle of LNG for someone else. Let me. Who was the jungle of LNG? Tarzan, sorry. I don't know why in my back of my head I have the name TT. Yeah, so Tarzan I think played horrendous in quarters. I think he played horrendous the first game. The game 2 and game 3 are fine. So it kind of like put shades on Scout's individual performance in this series. I think during the Swiss stage he has been playing out of his mind. And everybody was considering the MVP of the Swiss stage. So I have no doubt that Scout will come back with a better team and will probably sweep. If he doesn't win another world trophy, I would be surprised. Like he has the caliber of player that should at least get 2, or at least be runner-up for worlds like 2 or 3 times in his career. For Xiao, I think it's more on the tail end of his career. I mean, started in 2015. What did you say?
The setting sun.
The setting sun, like Xiaohu's career.
Oh yeah, setting sun. I mean, started 2015. If you look back, right? I mean, I feel
people forget, dude.
5 years ago.
The sad thing about the narratives is, cause every narrative when they had Uzi was about Uzi, dude. I think people forget he was even on those teams. Like, he was on the Golden Road himself in season 8, and like you say, he was playing years and years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it started. So his career started because I did a whole profile of like the 4 story. I picked for French audience 4 storylines of 4 players,
right,
for each one from their region. So I took Faker for Korea, I took Xiao, and it was like it's kind of the last call for all of them. Core JJ for NA and EU. I took Caps because I was like, oh, okay, it's kind of the time or no or never for him. And so I feel like I felt very bad for the individual performance Xiao because it does such a disservice to the monster he is and he's been in his career. Like winning 3 MSI, like people think they undermine MSI because obviously you have less density of talent in MSI, especially in the former format where regions were sending only one team.
Yes.
So you had to pretty much beat the champion of Europe and the champion of Korea to become champion, right?
Yes.
That's kind of how it played. Back then there was the LMS as well with the Flash Wars that was pretty dangerous, but it was pretty much always this top 4. 1 year NA went into finals, but most of the time it was just like Europe, LPL, China, Korea, and like you had to win it. But winning 3 titles, 2 back-to-back at 2 different positions is like really something that is incomparable in the history of League of Legends. Like it's a milestone that no player is even close to achieving ever, even the best of the best of the best of their role. And seeing that like a player such as Xiao ends, on such a sour note individually. I mean, I'm looking forward to see him like next year. Maybe he's gonna keep playing. But that someone who started in 2015, Faker is really an anomaly in terms of consistency and performance, and even him had like had pretty rough years. It's gonna be very hard for Xiao to come back and win this. The more the time goes on, the least I foresee him winning a trophy. Whereas for the Scout performance, there is no doubt in my mind that if you take Scout and you put him in a team that's more well-rounded than LNG,
you'd
which
still
is
be amazing.
possible.
I mean, the dream is like, first of all, there's already a pretty cool lineup speculated he might have, but also the other dream is one year he goes back to Korea and just goes on some all-star team there, right?
I wish he was. I think Korea has a. It's kind of a shame that I think now China has so many good players, and they have such a density. They used to have no mid laners. They have very good mid laners. They used to have like
supports with
support
MC
role,
Dodgy. Yes,
historically it was a little bit under the delivering. You had only like Meiko and then Ming.
Yes.
You have like 6, 7 like world-class supports. So with the density of talent there is in China, I would love to see like all these Korean players, go back and have an LCK that's more competitive than having like these 3 teams that kind of win it all, and all the other ones are just like, role playing as competitors. Think about Scout, Rookie, Doinbi. I mean, Doinbi doesn't play, but like all these Korean, former Kanavi, all these guys coming back to Korea and having all these super teams the way we had in 2014, with something I'd be very excited about, because I think that Scouts playing into the Korean environment would actually be
awesome.
More consistent. I think. Okay, that's probably a very hot take, but I think LPL teach you peak performance, and Korea teaches you consistency.
No, dude, if you think about it, that was the thing people even said, because Monty's always pointed this out. Yeah, the LPL won a lot of worlds, but the Korean teams always got out of the groups. They were always like you say, the consistency was always on Korea's side, whereas the LPL, we all know, there'd be one team did awesome and one team did absolutely dog shit. And it was like the extremes were so crazy.
Yeah, there is a core paradigm. It's LPL will tell you that the enemy cannot defend the Drake if they're dead. The Korean will tell you they cannot get to the Drake if you have vision and position and you're throwing your spells and you have the threat, and they will have to respect your option, right?
Right.
The Korean game assumes that the enemy team is gonna respect your option to win.
Yes.
LPL is gonna assume that if you're dead, you can't defend the dragon. That's literally how they think about the game. And I mean, this is obviously right. It's a narrowed down
broad strokes, yes,
approach. But there's a lot to it, and I think that a player such as Scout will thrive in the Korean environment because he has great fundamentals. I think Korea plays a lot of fundamentals, and I would love to see him express himself in the Korean league.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.